Hi, everyone. This is Jason. Welcome back to the show. Joining me today is Seth Estrada, host of the Mine Your Biz podcast. You can find Seth on Twitter at Seth Estrada and the Mine Your Biz podcast on your favorite podcast platform. The official Mine Your Biz website is mineyour.biz, that's B-I-Z, where you can find links to the podcast, YouTube channel, and educational articles and blog posts. Seth, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much for having me, man. This is a real treat.
I'm so happy to talk to you today. And the thing that actually, because when we first introduced ourselves to each other, I looked at your website and you sell mining equipment. So before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, how did you actually get into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
Oh man. So I'll make a long story short, right? Because I'm sure your listeners are like, "Oh my gosh, yet another person who, isn't Satoshi," right? Because that's basically describes all of us. Clearly, I'm not going to make any claims to have been on Bitcoin Talk in whatever 2010 or to have been an early miner. There are some people out there who, in our space and especially in crypto Twitter, they're accused of what's called LARPing, right? Live action role play.
Live action role play.
So if any listeners need an explanation, right? So it's very easy because you can claim pseudonymity or anonymity and say, well, in the early days, I needed to remain anonymous, so I used a handle, a special handle. But I don't want to air quotes dox myself, right? DOXX,
Right.
give away my real identity. And so I'm sorry, I hold the highest disdain for people who pretend to have been around the scene in 2009 or 2010. And you'll get weirdos who don't know the history. He'll say like, "Oh yeah, I was mining Bitcoin in 2007."
Right. That's great. You have a time machine. Oh,
right. Yeah. Did Satoshi know? Did you tell him? Wow, you should have let him in on that secret.
Right.
But so for me, the story started in 2013. That's when I started hearing buzz. But Jason, man, I didn't act on it. And I wear that as like a badge of shame, but I wear it publicly, right? I didn't act on it. I just heard about it because it was everywhere. It was starting to be mentioned on some TV shows, and there was some buzz on the web. And if you worked in IT or tech, which I think we've got a little bit of a shared background there,
right.
I worked in technology for Samsung USA, Samsung Telecom USA specifically. And so, people who I talked to were very techy and very nerdy. And I lived in Austin, Texas at the time, right? So we had like clean room silicon fabrication facilities on the other side of the town where I was working. So we had a lot of engineers and a lot of nerds. So, I'd hear buzz,
Right.
but I didn't do anything.
Right.
I didn't act like I should have, right? Hindsight.
Right.
But 2017, the price action was really attractive. And I got into mining because it seemed like, okay, this is, for me, it's something I understand, right? It's this visceral thing. I know how to build a system. And so this is no different from building like an SLI gaming rig, right? In my mind.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, GPU mining, that makes sense. You can probably scale it. There are even some chipsets at that time that'll handle 4 GPUs, which just seemed like overkill, right? Who would ever need 4 GPUs in one system?
Right.
But I saw some of that and thought, okay, I can build cool systems and they can make money while I sleep. Like that's just a good deal, I think, if I can earn some crypto coins that way.
Right.
So that mining just pulled me in a way that made perfect sense to a techie system builder nerd.
So you have the background in technology and building computers and all. Is that why you decided to start selling mining equipment? Because on your website, mineyour.biz, you actually do provide mining equipment. Is that why you decided to do that?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Part of it is that I also, my first foray into crypto content, right? So cryptocurrency oriented and related content, I published a video in early 2018 talking about the comparative pros and cons of different GPUs, because at that time, the common mining wisdom was, hey, if you're a noob and you don't have thousands of dollars lying around, you're just an average Joe trying to make some crypto with an average Joe salary, you can buy GPUs. They should be accessible, right? So I said, okay, well, I don't want to go and test every single GPU myself. So I made a spreadsheet. And I don't know why this resource didn't exist anywhere, but I said, okay, make a Google Doc spreadsheet. I'll chase down all of the hash rate numbers across Reddit and various different hash rate calculator websites, and I'll try to figure out what's a realistic, achievable performance level for each one of these cards for each one of the coin algorithms that they mine, and I put them all on one sheet, really easy to see, and then interpreted that data on a couple of other tabs of that spreadsheet, that workbook, so that people could sort via by performance, either hash per dollar. If that's what they were starting with, was really low funds, they could figure out what gets me the most bang for my buck, like what hash is really, really heavy for the dollar. And then another sheet that showed people what the most efficient card was. So if they maybe had a high cost of power ongoing, which, as you know, in mining, you'll spend more in electricity over several months or years than you will in the initial, or you should anyway, than the initial equipment purchase. And so I had those two sheets there. It fascinated me to see, okay, nobody's talking about this publicly right now, but I know these things move in cycles. I know people have talked about it before in earlier crypto, boom and bust cycles. So I made that spreadsheet and I made a video, and the YouTube algorithm I was just absolute candy for YouTube at that time, because YouTube was very crypto friendly right at the moment.
At the time.
Yeah, right. Fast forward 2 years, right? And we're all persona non grata, man. They're out to get us.
Right.
All the social media platforms. If you say crypto too loudly, they're like, you're trading unregistered securities, aren't you?
Security. This is harmful. Yeah, but those political ads, those are okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, right. Hypocrisy much?
Right. So let me ask you about your foray into content creating, because you do have a podcast and a channel and all. So was that an original part of what you're trying to do, or did that just become a natural progression?
It just kind of became a natural progression. I was interested in the space, and so something that I have in my background. I mentioned, yes, I worked in tech, but I got my degree in filmmaking, and I interned in a highly technical, in one of the more technical sides of filmmaking at an animation studio where everything is made inside of a computer. So you have to have a really solid render network, right, or supercompute cluster on location to render feature films that are done like animated features or visual effects studios. You have to have a really heavy hitting supercompute cluster there on site, and then you have to have really great hardware, or really great software rather, to wrangle that network and make it render out big jobs in a scalable and parallelized fashion. So the idea of kind of semi-distributed systems and then also local networks, it's not that I was some deep expert in that area as much as all that made sense. And I took what I graduated in, my education, and I turned that into more, I use that skill more for educating than I do for like making feature films or documentaries or whatever.
Right.
But creating content it's been something that I've done for a long time. So like self-published content, I should say, and then some professional stuff too.
Nice. So it's basically like showing people what you can do with this technology. That kind of okay, nice. So let's talk about some crypto. I'm still trying to get information on it, but I kind of want to touch on the guys at the electric facility who were set up their own mining. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't.
So really funny. Because I guess people are just like, yeah, an upstate New York power plant has been using some of its own electricity to mine Bitcoin on an industrial scale. It's a CoinDesk article. All right, hang on.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
just the operators of the electrical utility just didn't know, right? These employees kind of made it happen.
It was like, I think it was one of those situations where nobody knows until somebody talks. And, with all the stuff about Bitcoin going on, so people are like, hey, I do that. Oh, yeah, where do you do it from? You live in this one-bedroom apartment.
Right. Though, I don't know, man, upstate, there's a lot more space, right? If you've ever visited, a lot more space. It's not like, the city where everyone's stacked up on top of each other. But it's not exactly small town either. Like from what I can tell, it's not like rural America, like the flyover states, right? Where everybody knows each other, and you'd be discovered really fast if you did something out of
That's true.
kind of like strange.
Yeah, like out of the ordinary. But considering it's a power plant, well, actually, no, you're right, because there's so much equipment in power plants that who would notice one more piece of of equipment,
I
right?
gotta say though, the numbers don't quite match. So if they were, yeah, there you go. So if it was $50,000 a day, then that's a significant amount of hardware. Like that's a couple of containers worth of hardware, maybe a few. And I'd have to run the numbers really fast. I've got dusty spreadsheets that'll probably help me, right? Like just quickly. All right. So how many it's like work backwards, right? Bottom up, like, okay, profit. Now
Right.
let's work backwards and figure out how many machines we need,
Yeah.
depending on their cost for power. That, and also if they're leeching power from that utility, like
Well,
off peak
I think
power.
that's where the big actual hubbub came from, is that people are accusing them of leeching power off of the grid,
Hmm.
and so I think that's where the big thing comes from. Well, actually, let me get your opinion on what's going on with the social media. We talked about that quickly. Um, I'm noticing that it tends to go in cycles where they tend to leave us alone on social media, and then it goes into a time where they're just striking stuff down. And I'm wondering if, again, are we seeing the rise of Google Coin or something similar, and that's why we're having such an issue with YouTube right now. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's one reason why we keep seeing these issues come up?
Possibly. And it's tough to say, Jason, right? Because on the one hand, when you hear conspiracy theory, it's to take a grounded, level-headed approach. It's normally best to take anything that looks like malice and temper that with a grain of salt and think,
Hmm.
okay, you can usually explain certain social or economical or political phenomenon by saying, okay, maybe it's not malice, maybe it's just incompetence somewhere.
Right.
Like
Right.
somebody's
Yeah.
just not doing their job right.
Right.
Like we've seen that happen, right? If
Yes.
you've ever held a job at a major American corporation, also, you see how it's very easy for one person to make a mistake and then the ripples that has out into an organization. So why not YouTube? Why wouldn't that explain, maybe in part, why there's been a problem for crypto creators? I
That's
don't know. I
true.
think that could be part of it. Though, I mean, I think in general, crypto is anti-establishment.
Mm.
Full stop.
Yes.
Anybody who tells you that cryptocurrency was created to become the next financial instrument that was used by governments or used by large corporations to after the classical fashion of finance in this country, or even pre 1970s or pre 1960s finance in this country, anybody who believes that Bitcoin was created so that it could just be co-opted by government and corporations and large financial institutions, they didn't read the white paper. They didn't get the
Right.
memo.
Exactly. Well, and that's why when I hear people in the space talk about banks and governments, oh, they'll love this stuff. No, like, no, they won't, because you're
No.
challenging what they do. It's like the reason why Ross has 2 life sentences plus 40 years has less to do with what people were doing on the Silk Road than on the fact that Silk Road allowed people to transact in something that the government couldn't just clamp down on. It was like a don't do this or we'll step on you sentence. And that's why people need to understand that all this fighting that we're doing in crypto, it matters zero when you think there are governments out there that want to step on all of us. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally agreed. That said, what's difficult about shakeups like what we're experiencing on YouTube right now, and when we do see whether it's government intervention or it is corporate intervention or it's financial institution intervention, which is like an unholy combination of the two, right? The politics and
Politics and
corporations.
corporations, yeah.
Yeah. So when you see intervention from some of these entities and you see these shakeups, it leaves an opportunity for power grab, right? Because there's a vacuum.
Yes.
And so let's say for example that some freak series of events leaves every other YouTube channel that talks about crypto taken down. The only two left are yours and mine.
Right. Yeah.
We'd be publishing twice a day if we could.
Right. Yeah. Because
So
we'd be filling the void.
exactly. So to make it personal, right, and relevant about what we're doing right now,
Mhm.
and so we see that with some of the infighting within crypto, I think there are a lot of coin networks that are saying, okay, there's a shakeup coming, I can feel it, and if I can just get myself positioned for the next bull run or the potential. Oh my gosh, I'm like so depressed. I listened to Pomp's podcast with the guy, dude. Yeah, and he had a guest on that was talking about like bonds good, equities bad, his prognosis for like all the the health scare around the world. I don't want to say the words out loud. Could get screened, have this video taken down, but his prognosis for markets in the near to midterm.
Yeah.
And so when you have some of these coin networks saying, all right, well, there's the potential for at least a mildly economically depressed state, that's where fortunes are made. And they're not wrong, Jason. That is where fortunes are made every time.
Yes.
The Great Depression, that's what created the 1% class to begin with in this country.
Yeah, that's true.
They didn't exist before then.
All these billionaires that we have running around now were built out of the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes, sir. But the legacy is that when there's been a serious depression or serious financial problem, that's where the people who are positioned and who have leverage, when they go in, they can crack open those opportunities wide and just do things that other people can't, or maybe other people don't see.
Yeah. Right. Wow. Yeah. And it's sad because it's not going to get any better. It is actually going to get worse. And the more the market, because you saw this past week, the market took a dump. And, things aren't going to get any better. So you got to make sure you're ready.
Yeah. Robinhood, you get those notifications. I don't know if you're on Robinhood.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
Right. Yeah. This morning, everything's like, hey, 52-week low.
Yeah, right. Well, what about so the other day, Robinhood was offline. And they were offline during one of the highest trading days in recent history. And everybody was like, what the hell? And they're like, oh, we're down for maintenance. No.
Right.
Turn back
on.
on.
Maintenance. They're trying to keep us all from collectively taking their shirt off, man. Like
right, exactly. Right. I mean, last thing they want is a bank run, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about something that I think is more aligned with our personal views. Let's talk about privacy, because I see the hat, and thank you for wearing that.
Hey, this is one of the few bits of merch that I paid for. Nobody sent this to me, and the logo even is Creative Commons licensed. And I will promote this project for free any day.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think you have two different mentalities in crypto. Not distinct mentalities, but there are two different issues that people that we're not talking about, which is the how quickly you can use it and use it as money, and the privacy issue that I think was at the heart of why a lot of us got into crypto to begin with. And for example, Monero, Zcash, those are privacy-oriented cryptocurrencies. But the idea that you're going to be able to use those for commerce is not as great as, say, one that's like Bitcoin, which is an open distributed ledger that anybody can see. So do you think that for our purposes, person-to-person purposes, you're going to see more people moving towards the privacy coins, or do you think it's just going to stay everyone's primarily using Bitcoin?
So I think that's a brilliant question, first off. And, I think that, Jason, what we're going to see as a trend is exactly the opposite. And let me defend my position here. I think we're going to see exactly the opposite, precisely because with some of the tools like, say, Wasabi Wallet or Samurai Wallet that you can have on mobile for doing Bitcoin mixing or Bitcoin tumbling, it's called. Right. It's a way to anonymize the coins that you own and shake any kind of chain analysis that's taking place so that you, with change addresses or with new addresses that you issue, your coins can kind of functionally, they become fungible again, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're no longer tracked or assigned to you from anybody who may be watching. So with that, that kind of works better in a circular economy or in a closed economy. It doesn't work so well for commerce because you already have exchanges that are saying, if we see you rinsing your coins, right? You may also hear it called that. See you rinsing your coins or tumbling your coins, then we will deplatform you.
Right.
You can't trade with us anymore.
Right.
That's a big trend. And so I think we'll see just the opposite, Jason. We'll see that with Bitcoin, it becomes more of a de facto peer-to-peer thing. And maybe that limits us in terms of the kinds of transactions we can do, because realistically, a $30 transaction, not great on Bitcoin. Even still, fees are lower right now, but not great. But if we were to tumble our coins and I sent you $30 in Bitcoin, or, whatever, like we settle up after going out to dinner or something, send you $50-$60, at least I know that it's been mixed. And like you said, we can prove that the transaction went through. But blockchain by its definition, like any decent cryptocurrency, will give you a transaction ID, so you can validate that it went through.
Right.
But I think that Bitcoin, that it will become something that is a little bit more private. It's still being held by larger corporations, right? By the custodial entities like Coinbase and the Coinbases and Binances of the world. They have some of the largest wallets out there. But I think we're going to see a trend away from them towards decentralized exchanges, and then a little bit more peer-to-peer use, and maybe even some commerce potentially. But I think we're going to see a lot more people leave the major exchanges, and people, if we can get the word out and educate people, hopefully we can get people away from derivatives and futures, because that's the point at which the Fed, they're playing with a loaded deck, or with loaded dice, right? Or with a stacked deck. And for us over in cryptocurrency, we're if we participate in futures or derivatives, then we're playing into where they already have strengths, right? Like, one of the Gracies from Gracie Jiu-Jitsu school said that jiu-jitsu turns a mixed martial arts competition. It's as though a mixed martial arts competition has become the ocean, and jiu-jitsu makes them sharks, right? And the same is true of these organizations, right? Like, they swim in waters that we can't hope to tread. Right. And they will eat us alive with futures and derivatives.
Which is why it annoys me when people in crypto start talking about futures and ETFs. I'm like, you have no idea what you're asking for. You may like the idea of Bitcoin being traded on NASDAQ, but once the Fed and the SEC get in on this, they don't tend to get out. So you should expect your addresses to start being tracked, because you're in their field now. And why? That wasn't the point of this. I mean, if you look at the white paper, there's a whole section on privacy, and it actually goes back to, and when Satoshi wrote it, there were no mixers. There was no washing. You just had to know how to use more than one address to do what you're doing. And that's why I think, projects like Monero and Zcash have their place, is because they include the privacy aspect from the beginning. It's not something that you have to take it, put it into something, swish it all around with something else, and so it doesn't look like you. It's hard to identify you to begin with. And that's one thing that I think we're missing in the crypto conversation is, sure, we are trying to build an economy, but for a lot of us, we're not trying to be identified the same way we're identified with Visa and MasterCard.
Oh yeah, no, just the opposite. I think most of us would prefer to be less identifiable by Visa and MasterCard. That makes perfect sense to me, Jason. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That if they're, on the one hand, I think the Bitcoin maximalists and Bitcoin loyalists are hoping for a future in which Bitcoin and specifically uppercase B, BTC Bitcoin, that it kind of takes the place of traditional fiat currencies and makes it, and steps up to the status of being a global world currency.
Right.
But that would require a lot of different user behaviors. That would require,
one of the best ways that I ever heard it put was, the world that would need to be created for Bitcoin to become the main source of commerce is not the world you'd want to live in. A lot of things would have to change in order for Bitcoin to become the world commerce unit of commerce, right? Kind of like the way the United States dollar is. I mean, think about it. The United States dollar didn't become the world reserve currency until after World War II.
Oh yeah, no,
And
it did take two wars of us going out and showing the rest of the world who we thought was boss.
right. So let's end it there. Uh, Seth, I really want to thank you for joining me today on Crypto Insights Journal. Everyone, you can find Seth on Twitter at Seth Estrada, and his website again is mineyour.biz. Be sure to subscribe to his podcast and his YouTube channel and support his work. Seth, thank you for joining me today.
Jason, thank you again. It was a pleasure.